I'm Bill Castle, and this is Free Expression. This program is all about conveying the Christian message from a Catholic point of view and defending the liberty which makes it possible to do that. We talk with creative, interesting people about how so-called fact-checking distorts the facts and the unique contributions of Black composers to Catholic liturgy. Join us, sit back and enjoy some free expression. There was a time when if we were in search of a fact, we'd look it up in the encyclopedia. No more. Nowadays we go to the ultimate source of all knowledge, the internet. Hey, if it's online, it's got to be true, right? Well, maybe not so much. We all know there are many agendas at work in curating the information we find through Google or DuckDuckGo or any of the numerous media sites. But never fear, there are online fact-checking services to separate reality from propaganda and to tell us what information sources are accurate. But who fact-checks the fact-checkers? Can we be sure that what they're telling us is correct? Thomas Buckley is a former newspaper reporter and one-time public official for whom accuracy is vital in his work as a communications and planning consultant. He's looked deeply into the fact-check industry, and he's taking a few minutes now to share what he's found. Tom, thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
We're all familiar with sites like Snopes or PolitiFact or FactCheck.org. We probably use them from time to time, but the question is, are they trustworthy?
I think they started with good intent, but I think they're just another aspect of the captured media, and I would say no. I mean, Snopes actually was really good, and then it started doing things like fact-checking the Babylon Bee, which is clearly satire. It's right or left under politics. You can't miss that. And then, of course, they told everyone a couple weeks ago that the president was not wearing a hat backwards when there was a picture of it. And then fact-check and PolitiFact, it was always the squirreliest one because it's run by the Poynter Institute, which has been biased for decades. The people who come out of Poynter are journalists. A good reporter is a reporter, not a journalist. They're a craftsman in the paragraph factory. They're not a professional. So what you have is that kind of... They're looking to confirm what they want confirmed, and they're looking to eliminate or denigrate what they wish to denigrate. They're not fact-checking. They're just, in PR, it's called third-party validation. Let's say you know a guy named Bob. Bob knows his steaks. You ask Bob, hey, is the new steakhouse any good? It's great. Word-of-mouth advertising is amazing. One step removed from that is basically a transfer of trust. If you know, let's say your local Friends of the Library is an amazing organization, and they come out and they endorse some local project, you're more likely to go, oh, there might be something good in it. Where third-party validation gets really problematic is when it's bought and paid for.
Yeah.
Or when you can start an AstroTurf instead of grassroots campaign. You can start a nonprofit philanthropic foundation called Basket Full of Yawning Golden Retriever Puppies and have them be in favor of distribution of anthrax. It doesn't really matter. So what the fact-checking sites do is provide that theoretically unbiased stamp of approval on lies. It's that simple. And they say, oh, it's fact-checked, so therefore it must be true.
Well, what's driving them? And I guess more to the point, who's paying for it? Or what's behind the whole thing?
Well, what's driving them is a lot of the people, especially at PolitiFact, they're all Poynter Institute people. So they're inherently, it's an incredibly progressive organization. Funding, like PolitiFact, is funded by, I know it's Facebook, I think it's Google, And a number of the sites that fact check are funded by tech companies, again, looking for a stamp of approval. Oh, PolitiFact says that's true, so we'll leave it up. Oh, PolitiFact says that's false, we'll take it down. And of course, there are organizations that are semi-fact checkers like Center for Countering Digital Hate and all the other organizations, and a lot of those do actually get government money to basically part of what Matt Taibbi and Mike Schellenberg have called the censorship industrial complex. And the fact checkers are a huge part of that because, again, they provide that theoretical sheen of legitimacy, of nonpartisanness, and which is false, again. So, but that's where it's coming from. They're not independent, just people out there reading papers and going, oh, that's wrong. They are bought, paid for parts of the system.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of a background do you have to be a fact checker? I mean, what?
You have to be a journalist. That's who they hire. They don't hire reporters. They hire journalists.
One tends to question the preparedness of these people. You know, what gives them their authority, I suppose. But how is the process supposed to work? I mean, there is a desire on the part of most people to believe something or to wish that something could be verified as being accurate. I mean, that's an appealing idea, but obviously it's not. It doesn't translate into fact, but how is their process supposed to work? Do they just get together in the morning and decide what they're going to distort, or do they make at least a half-baked effort to get things right? How do they operate?
Well, you have to, when you look at, just go to any of the fact-check sites. First, as you just mentioned, they decide what they're going to fact-check. And if you look especially at CNN's version of Facts First, I think it's called, they literally had, 357 lines of Donald Trump last fall, and they occasionally fact-check Biden. The facts they choose to check are picked for very political reasons, and they're picked for ideological reasons. For example, there was a fact-check that terrible fire in Maui. There was crazy people on the internet were saying that Oprah had a space laser that burned the town down so she could build a 15-minute city. No, that didn't happen. It really didn't. Pretty sure we can say that that's pants on fire for Pinocchio. It didn't happen. But what PolitiFact then did, they actually... See, most people focused on the space laser part, but they picked up a little side thing on 15-minute cities and smart cities, which are very controversial, and deservedly so. There's an absolutely legitimate debate to decide whether and how much you want your locality to be monitoring everything you do. So what PolitiFact did was take the space laser thing, which is undebatably crazy, put it next to the very debatable, legitimate topic of whether or not smart cities are good, and they smushed them into one fact check. So it was like 16, 17 paragraphs. Most of it was about how great smart cities are. So it's a tactic. It's put crazy next to sane, so sane looks crazy. And with fact checkers, the pedantry is astonishing. Oh, that's a lie. His name's Robert on his birth certificate, and you called him Bob. A very specific example of that is in the Biden infrastructure bill, there was some money put aside to create a system that would passively detect if a person was drunk when they got behind the wheel of a car or while they're driving. I'm not sure how. It would be looking at where your eyes go. It could even, there could even be a sensor on the steering wheel that could check your sweat. And it was called by opponents of the idea a kill switch. And the fact check came back, this is from PolitiFact, it said, no, it's not a kill switch. Yes, it is true that if and when it's developed, it will not let you start your car. It is true that if and when it's developed, it can stop your car while you are driving it, theoretically by gently pulling over to the side of the road. But again, the technology does not exist. Therefore, it's not a kill switch. because the words kill switch were not directly in the bill. It's amazing how many of the fact checks go through that. Ron DeSantis and a transgender teenager issue. He said, a teenager can go to California and get, quote, gender-affirming care without parental permission. And PolitiFact checked it as mostly false. The fact is, you can. Teenagers can go, and without parental consent, they can declare themselves, they can go to a judge and get conservancy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really easy to do in California. And once you put your foot in the state, you qualify for Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid, paid for, taken care of, done. It's completely within the realm of possibility. The fact check actually said, yeah, it's possible, but it's highly, highly unlikely that such a set of circumstances would occur, said our experts. Okay, well, just because something is unlikely doesn't make it false. I could say, you could get in a car accident today. Yeah, it's unlikely, but it's not false.
Right.
And they deemed the statement false. So whenever you're looking at any of the fact-check sites, look very carefully, because there are so many tricks and treats and tweaks that can be used to, however, if they want something to be true, it will be true. If they want it to be false, you can make it false.
Well, we're all encountering this all the time. It seems like you can't read a news report nowadays without somebody telling you how it's inaccurate or it's contrived or it's false or something. I mean, can this be boiled down to a simple rule of thumb that people can refer to when they run up against this sort of situation? What's the basic thing that people should be on the lookout for when it comes to this fact-checking business?
The media was always criticized as being liberal, but it was small L liberal. What you have now is a media that is so desperate for funds, put it this way. When the New York Times, they bought the Boston Globe in the late 90s, they paid $1 billion for it. The Boston Globe was recently sold for about $47 million, and mostly for the building and to get rid of the pension debt. The economics of everything have changed. The driving force used to be the most general audience you could get, because that would drive circulation, which would drive your advertising revenue.
Right.
And now it's, you can make enough money by targeting a niche market. So you don't have to care about anyone else. And you have to pander to that niche market because they can just click unsubscribe and there goes your $100 a year. It's a reinforcing feedback loop, a Mobius strip of lying for money. Look at reporters' names. I know a lot of people don't, but when you read a story, like in the Los Angeles Times, which is a terrible, terrible newspaper, they had one guy named Ralph Vardabedian who covered the California high-speed train debacle. $33 billion turned into $133 billion. 7 years has turned into 30 years. Don't ask. But he had great stuff, always. It was honest, it was fair, and it was just devastating to the project. He's gone. If you're reading stuff in your paper, etc., or online, if you see a name that often, and you trust it, because do some other checking just to make sure. You go with it. And also, I think it's important, let's say, if you're conservative, go to liberal sites and see what's being said over there. If you're liberal, go to conservative sites and see what's being said over there. Because just that one act expands your mind to other possibilities, and it makes you a lot more focused on if what you're reading is true or not.
So it really places the responsibility on the reader. We have to.
Oh, absolutely. It is the consumer that now has to figure it out. And in theory, the fact checker was supposed to do that, but that hasn't worked out.
Thomas Buckley, thank you very much. I appreciate your thoughts on this. It's a problem we all face. We're all looking for the truth, and it seems to be getting harder and harder to find it. So I guess
you're absolutely welcome. I appreciate it. One thing, I do have 2 Substacks I'd like to mention. One is called Checkmate, which I was amazed that the name hadn't already been taken, because I've only started a few months ago. And that's specifically where I fact check fact checkers.
Yeah,
and then I have a
great.
sister site called The Point, which is more general. But, if people want to see it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll have to follow your stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Most Catholics probably don't give much thought to who created the hymns, mass settings, and other liturgical elements of our worship. Those who are into church music likely think about composers like Johann Sebastian Bach if they're oriented to the classics, or Bernadette Farrell if they're into the pop folk style. Some years ago, I attended a seminar conducted by the well-known black liturgist Grayson Warren Brown. He passed away quite recently, but I recall his charming smile and impish wit. He disarmed his audience of mostly white musicians with an opening remark. "See," he said, "there really are black Catholics." Well, there are plenty of black Catholics and plenty of black musicians who have made contributions to Catholic faith life. Nate Tinner Williams is founder and editor of the Black Catholic Messenger, a journal that serves Catholics of color. He's written about the African American musical experience, and he's here now. Nate, thanks for taking time to speak with us.
Thanks for having me on.
To me, black church musicians are people like Grayson Warren Brown, who I mentioned, or the late Sister Thea Bowman, or even organists like Brandon Spence, who's a respected Bach interpreter and who taught my son, I'm pleased to say. Who are some other figures of importance that we should know about?
Well, I think the story of Black Catholic liturgy specifically from that community starts with Father Clarence Rivers. He was a priest in Cincinnati, Ohio. His Mass, called the American Mass Program, was one of the first English language masses conducted after Vatican II. National attention started to focus on him there with his hymn, God is Love, which was used for the first official English Mass conducted by the bishops of the United States. So that's kind of where the fusion between black musical forms and the Roman rite of the Mass kind of got started, because obviously before that, everything was in Latin. And I think from Father Rivers, things kind of flowed pretty quickly. You had a lot of different names popping up. You had guys like Grayson Warren Brown. We had Sister Thea Bowman, like you mentioned. She was very influential in the liturgy, and other names like Mary Lou Williams, who was a big pioneer in jazz mass. Leon C. Roberts was a very popular gospel mass, Catholic gospel artist. And there's several such names like that people are not familiar with.
Yeah, they've kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. We think about well-known gospel artists, but they're more on the evangelical side of things. The black Catholic musicians are not as prominent.
Yeah, and sometimes they're kind of hidden. Like, people know their songs, but they don't know it's by a black Catholic composer. One example is one of the most ubiquitous English language hymns, Taste and See, which was written by Dr. James E. Moore, who passed away just a few years ago. People don't know that was composed by a black Catholic who had substantial gospel chops. So yeah, there's some crossover, but not a lot of people are aware of it. Another hymn is Jesus is Here Right Now, another song used by Protestants that they don't know was written by a Catholic.
There's a lot of controversy about musical styles. There's a strong neo-traditionalist movement now that's trying to move more toward traditional hymns, and even beyond that, sometimes casting hymns aside and just going for straight Gregorian chant. Are the black parishes caught up in those kinds of disputes?
Generally, I would say black parishes are not. Since the phenomenon of the Black Catholic movement, which occurred between the late 1960s and the late 1990s, most of the roughly 400 black parishes in America have used gospel music, generally speaking. It was just kind of adopted as the norm for those parishes. So the traditional liturgy, I would say, pretty quickly faded out in those parishes, and they haven't really looked back. That said, though, there have been black Catholics who were also influential in the traditionalist movement. One name that comes to mind is one that has become more known lately, Mother Mary Wilhelmina Lancaster, who was a Benedictine nun in Gower, Missouri. She was known for founding an order of traditionalist nuns whose music of Gregorian chant became very, very popular.
I understand that there's a movement for sainthood for her.
There are growing calls for that. The diocese has not moved on that officially, but it could be in the works.
You've written extensively about black musicians, and you did one article that I found quite fascinating about some prominent black musicians who were Catholics, and I never realized it. Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Lena Horne, Harry Belafonte, and others. Did those folks get involved in writing Christian music at all, or doing anything musical in their churches?
Some of them did. I know I mentioned in there Mary Lou Williams. She was one who was definitely involved in Catholic liturgy. But generally speaking, I would say they did not have an enduring impact on Catholic music. But many of them were involved in church music as before they became professionals, like Billie Holiday. Harry Belafonte did record several gospel albums. Nina Simone also recorded Christian music. But specifically institutional church music, most of them were not involved in that, no.
As a little footnote, a tidbit from my personal life, I should mention that I took voice lessons as a child, and the accompanist at our music studio was a young piano player named Eunice Wayman, who later became prominent as Nina Simone. So I have the distinction of having been accompanied by one of the great names in American jazz.
Yes, she's quite incredible. And I guess I should clarify that I cannot say with confidence that she was a Catholic, but she did receive a funeral mass when she died, and she's buried in a Catholic cemetery in France, as far as I know. So it's possible that she converted, but I don't want to say that I know that for a fact.
Yeah, I can't say either, but it's just an interesting little tidbit that I've often mused about. I use the song When the Saints Come Marching In as the theme of this show. I understand it's unclear who actually authored that piece. Several songwriters have laid claim to it. But I've always assumed that there's got to be Catholic influence in it. It came from New Orleans, and one of the best-known versions was recorded by Louis Armstrong. Do you know anything about that song?
I could not tell you much about the origins of the song, but I could say it's one of the most ubiquitous among black Catholics in Louisiana. It's become a part of the Catholic tradition there. There's one parish in New Orleans, St. Augustine, that celebrates a gospel jazz mass every week. And if there's a Saints game, they also sing that song to kind of encourage the team. So it's generally understood as the song you sing if you want to give a black Catholic vibe in that region, which I think is really, really fascinating because I grew up with it as something very different. I grew up as a Protestant.
I'm a convert myself, so there's a bit of a story to your background. How did you come to the Catholic Church?
Yeah, that's a bit of a long story, but I guess you could say I gradually came to my wit's end as a Protestant, wanting things to make sense that were not going to make sense, and kind of paradoxically, while looking for a less institutional church, I found some of the most institutional churches there are. I first discovered the Eastern Orthodox Church and was very fascinated by that, partly because I had an anti-Catholic bias, so I wasn't going to be able to understand the Catholic faith from Catholic people and Catholic sources. But if I could understand the sacraments another way, which is how it ended up being, it started to just make a lot of sense to me. And I almost became Eastern Orthodox, and then I was exposed more to Catholic teaching, and once I lost the bias, it all kind of just fell into place.
How did the Black Catholic Messenger come about?
Well, shortly after I converted, there was the racial reckoning in the United States that kind of got everyone's minds thinking about the need for more representation of many different minority groups, but especially African Americans and black people. And in the Catholic Church, I don't think there was any exception. A lot of hard questions had to be asked, and one of the ones I started asking was, why is there no black Catholic newspaper? There was another journalist who had started doing research on just black Catholic professionals in Catholic media, and he found so few that it got my mind going about, well, there should be an outlet, not just writers and professionals. And so I started asking around, and some people offered their services, and we got a group together to found this new thing, and we ended up with the name Black Catholic Messenger, and within a few months of the idea being sent out there, we had we had a publication started.
Well, if people are interested in following your work or perhaps signing on to the Black Catholic Messenger, where can they find some more information?
They should run as fast as they can to blackcatholicmessenger.org. Everything they need to know is right there.
Nate Tinner Williams, editor of the Black Catholic Messenger. Thanks a lot for being with us. This whole question of Black influence in Catholic music is unknown and fascinating. I hope that more information can come to life, and I encourage you to dig more deeply into it and keep writing about it.
I'll certainly do my best. Thanks for having me on.
Saint Mary, Saint Joseph, Saint Peter, Saint Paul, Saint John, Saint Elizabeth, Saint Augustine, Saint Cecilia, Holy Martyrs, Ugandan saints, Brother Martin King, Saint Porres, now all ye saints, that we might be more holy, that we might be more loving, that we might be like Jesus, that we might build your kingdom, that we might live for justice, that we might end all hatred, that we might preach the good news, that we might feel the Holy Ghost. Oh Lord, send down your Spirit.
Grayson Warren Brown with the Father Clarence Rivers Gospel Choir, Litany of the Saints. Be with us next time when we explore other aspects of religious communication and look deeper into the great Christian heritage of free expression. Free Expression with Bill Castle is a production of Good Shepherd Catholic Radio and Company Publications, where good books, good music, and good radio are always good company. Dan Curis provided technical assistance. Theme and incidental music are by Dan Adam. The program was produced and directed by Bill Castle. This is Good Shepherd Catholic Radio.